What's up, delivery fam, and welcome to another episode of Chop It Up Live. Today, my guest and I, we're going to be talking about why is Grubhub in last place compared to DoorDash and Uber Eats. My guest, go ahead and introduce yourself, brother.
Well, hey, thanks for having me on. And my name's Ron. I run EntreCourier.com, and I've been doing delivery, since the beginning of 2018. In fact, when I started out, I think I remember watching a guy on YouTube called Uber Eats Delivery Man.
You're bringing back memories, Entre.
That's the good old days. And I started Entre Courier mostly, I think, to kind of help people understand this idea that, hey, you're running a business here. You agreed that you're going to be doing services for these companies as a business, and the best way to keep from being exploited by these delivery companies is just embrace that idea that you're running a business. So Entre Courier focuses on it's more about a lot of the business topics, and it's about this idea of just taking control of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so started a podcast here a couple of years ago called Deliver on Your Business, and basically just kind of writing about business topics and just taking control of what we do as independent business owners. That's kind of the theme of it all.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So Entre, listen, I wanted to chop it up with you, especially since, we scheduled this in advance, but Grubhub has been on a decline for years now, but I did not want to accept it. Okay. I would see comments, I would see, videos, I would hear things in videos like, oh, Grubhub is on their way down. And I'm like, man, Grubhub still got a chance, man. Like, no, they're not going down just yet. They getting ready to fight, And I'm like, when I saw when they partnered with Yum Brands, a lot of drivers would say that's when things started to go downhill for Grubhub. Would you agree or disagree?
I think that was kind of the beginning of them panicking, maybe,
Panicking. That's a new word for me. Okay.
I just, there were a couple things that happened. First, they started moving to more fast food places like Yum Brands, the Taco Bell orders.
Yeah.
And the second thing was that wasn't too long after that when they started adding restaurants without their permission and doing these unpartnered and the order and pay type deliveries.
Yeah.
They never used to do that. And all of that was because all of a sudden, I think all these other companies were starting to outsell them.
Yeah.
And they needed to get more people on their platform. And so I think they kind of dropped their standards some to try and keep up with the other guys.
But do you remember Matt Maloney was on Mad Money once? Well, he was on multiple times, but there was an episode of Mad Money and he was saying something like, oh, pretty much like, we're not worried. Like, it's a $200 billion industry. Like, we're not worried. And, I will say,
like that.
I will say, just seeing that he went from there and their executives kind of like, they were just walking around, prancing around like, oh, it's not a big deal. And then he comes back to Mad Money and then he's like, oh, our customers are promiscuous. I'm like, whoa, what are you getting at, Matt? Where are you going with this, right? And then next thing you know, the lawsuits and then the situation between Yum Brands and them and Matt, and it's like he's doing things and they trying to. I was like, what is going on? To me, the 2018 Grubhub was the last year before they changed the pay model to the estimated time and distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the last year that Grubhub was as great. It was the greatest Grubhub. You agree or disagree?
Yeah, I would say, 2019, for a lot of 2019, they were still pretty good, but you could already start to see a little bit of a downhill. And then, I don't know, right before the pandemic, that's when I really started to notice that it's like, man, this is a different company altogether.
Yeah.
And the beginning of 2020, January, February or something,
Hmm.
it just really started to seem going downhill.
Now, I try to find the positive in these platforms because when I see them making changes, like say with Grubhub, right? They got rid of the old bags. They brought in the new ones, right? That's because Just Eat Takeaway. Now they're trying to put their colors out there. They're trying to make a name for themselves. Said in the U.S. Grubhub was their stepping stone, I guess, right? That's what I'll call it, right? They wanted to come over here, and Grubhub, they bought them for 7 point something billion. Do you know that number?
I don't off the top of my head.
No, okay.
7.3 comes to mind, but I don't know if that's right.
Yeah. All right. So they're making changes, right? And then I see with the algorithm or the ride-alongs I've been doing, they're literally paying $1 per mile on majority of the orders that they send me. Is it that way in every market? I'm not saying it is or it isn't, right? But I'm only speaking for myself. I don't know if you remember this story where a driver received an order. I believe it was in your market, Denver. A driver received an order on the Grubhub platform for a location that was down the street from the customer. But the driver got the order 40 miles away. Do you recall any story like that? And the driver accepted it, but it was taking so long to get to the customer. I believe the customer received cold food and made a complaint. But the driver was like, I came from 40 miles away.
Yes.
I don't know how much the payout was, but in the Grubhub of 2022, the one that I have been experiencing, that would have been a $40 payout if they paid $1 per mile like they do on majority of what I see now. So back then, I doubt they paid $1 per mile. I don't know how much that was. That was years ago, though. And it happened in your market, but you never heard of this.
Yeah, that one doesn't ring a bell to me, but that could have been just, that's been long enough ago that they could have just gotten lost in probably memories of all sorts of other stories,
Right. So
back in the old pay model, it used to be it was $3.50 plus 50 cents per mile. The base was $3.50 and then it was 50 cents a mile. But that was as straight as the crow flies per mile. But, so I mean, back then, if it was before the pay model change, that only would have been about a $23. That only would have been $23.50 if it was a straight line.
Yeah.
It would have been $23.50 plus whatever the tip is. I'll tell you, it wouldn't have been me, that's for sure.
Now, I've been trying, like I said earlier, I've been trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. I know when it comes down to business, it's like a lot of things got to be changed when you're trying to save money, you're trying to be profitable, you're trying to please your investors, all these different things. I have some knowledge of it. I don't have 100% knowledge of it, right? But just to see how first Yum Brands, I think Yum Brands invested, was it $200 million in Grubhub? I think it was about $200 million, and they owned, I forgot what the percentage was they own a portion of Grubhub. And then to see how those two, Matt Maloney and Yum, going at it about their agreement, that I was like, what is happening? I don't know. So I thought that was going to be the beginning of them going hard at DoorDash. This is when I started seeing before the orange bags, before Just Eat Takeaway, right? That's when they increased. They got away from those really thin and flimsy insulated bags, and then that little pizza bag that they would send everyone. Then they got the real deal one that everybody loves now, right? They got the red ones, and I heard that the newer bags are even better. Maybe I haven't gotten those, but the red ones with the
I mean,
Grubhub logo, the GH, and you can use one as a pizza bag. That's when I saw
those
all
were the
those.
best in the business.
Those were coming out, and I was like, "Oh, Matt about to do some big things." That's what I was thinking. Matt is about to do some big things, and he went on Mad Money. We're not worried about DoorDash. This is a $200 billion industry, and I'm like, okay. He got the swag going on. He about to do some things. And then I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, brother.
And here was the thing that I noticed was about the time that the whole Yum Brands and really Taco Bell.
Yeah.
That was it. I mean, that was the issue, was Taco Bell.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about the time that the Taco Bell deal came into place that it almost seemed like they started their war on drivers, and especially their war on cherry pickers.
Yeah.
And I think it was because all of a sudden we're dealing with a lot more low or no tip orders than we were used to on Grubhub.
Yeah.
That was back in the day when Grubhub didn't do that minimum pay the stuff that they did in the pandemic.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people don't remember those days.
Yeah.
But if there was no tip, it was $3.50, and or it was $3 because of the new pay model. They dropped that.
Right.
And all of a sudden, there were a whole lot more of those, and there were a whole lot more drivers saying, "We're not taking that garbage."
Right.
And all of a sudden, it was like Grubhub had to figure out some way to try and force or manipulate or scare drivers into taking more orders. And I started hearing more of people being told things by driver care or by their driver specialist.
Yeah.
It was never put on paper, but it was always this, it always felt like it was threats or something like that. And I think they said just enough because they know drivers talk to one another, and there were the YouTube channels, there were the Facebook groups and stuff like that. They knew it was going to get out there, that if they scared just enough drivers and that word started getting around, drivers would start feeling like, oh man, I can get deactivated for not accepting enough orders. And it just seems like it almost felt like Grubhub turned on the drivers then, that it was like drivers started realizing that some of these orders are not worth taking, and they started rejecting more often. And I think a lot of that started with Taco Bell. And then Grubhub had to do something about it. And instead of trying to fix the system, they blamed the drivers. I think that was a lot of, and that's where I think things started to turn a lot. As far as the relationship with drivers, I think.
Yeah. I mean, just even down to, I felt like they were doing some things, like you said, they were starting to turn on the drivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why did they have to change the driver care number so often? It's like they were trying to get drivers away from having support. That's what it felt like. It's like, why are you changing the driver care number? It's driver care. It's not customer care. So why wouldn't you have, you provide this information? Like, why wouldn't you give a driver, hey, if you have any issues, contact driver care at this phone number? I had to find out who driver care was by them calling me.
Yep.
They called me and I see a number I never seen before. And I'm like, what is this? Oh, this is Ron from driver care. And it driver care. Oh, so this is a new number. Let me save this now. So I'm like, why? I've said it multiple times where going from Grubhub for work and seeing how they pulled those dispatchers that were in direct contact with the Grubhub for work drivers, right? Mm-hmm. They were in direct contact with them, and then they put them in new positions, and they turned all those corporate orders into XL orders that were available for whoever that would take them. So I'm like, what are you doing?
I remember one time getting a text from them, and I texted back, is there really somebody on the other end of this line? Uh-huh. And they answered.
They answered?
Yes, there is. But yeah, I think that's another thing that you saw changing, I mean, there's a whole group, there's a whole section. I wouldn't be surprised if a good majority of the people listening right now didn't even realize that there used to be a thing called a driver specialist.
Yeah.
It used to be you had somebody in your town that you could go to.
Exactly. Or you could just call or email if you did not, because they had, like, say, if in Florida, right, we had a driver specialist that was over the entire state of Florida, and I think some other states as well, or some other cities. And she was easily accessible by email. You might not get a response right away. It might take a couple of days, a couple of weeks, just depends. And she is the one that gave me the Grubhub for Work opportunity, because she saw in a month, in 6 weeks, I did 600 deliveries on Grubhub. And she was telling me like, oh my gosh, no, drivers do not do that. So I want to give you this opportunity for larger orders, right? And I'm like, okay, this is just me a month and a half on the platform. And then they offered me this more money, right? So I'm like, oh, this is the place to be. No, this is Grubhub. Oh, listen, I don't say this much, but I signed up on a Thursday, right? That Friday, they closed the market. Like, no one signed up. So I signed up right the day before they closed any new signups in my area. So I was like, oh man, I got on just in time. And then they're offering me more money with Grubhub for Work in 6 weeks. I'm like, this got to be a record, you know? So I'm like, man, I love the platform. I'll just tell you that. This is why I'm so, I feel a little hurt by it. Yes, I did become a cherry picker, right? But Grubhub was one of those platforms I really enjoyed working before they started adopting a lot of DoorDash ways. Like, even down to, hey, you don't seem like you're headed towards the restaurant. I remember the days they never sent anything, you know? Yeah. Like, so I saw the platform as, this is a great platform to work. I could toggle available, toggle unavailable. If I want to work, if I don't want to work. Then they started putting in all these rules. This is before like Prop 22, right? AB5 and all that. Right. So like they started putting in all these rules, and I'm like, this was such a free platform, and drivers sign up and we enjoy this because of the freedom. So I'm like, why are you making so many changes and you're making this feel more and more like you're just squeezing me or pushing me into this corner that I don't want to be in, and you're tarnishing this relationship that we had. You turned me into a cherry picker. And I say them because I was one of their drivers that would take every single order that came to my phone, no matter the miles, right? Whether I knew it was good or not, I was doing it because they were scratching my back. I was scratching theirs. I was doing them a favor, trying to knock out these orders nobody else wanted to do for them. So just to see how they turned out, man. And then now this situation with Just Eat Takeaway, now putting them up for adoption. This is not a joke about adoption. I don't want anybody to be put up for adoption. That's not what it is. But it's just more like they just purchased Grubhub. Like, how? That's got to be a record. You buy a company and you just get rid of it within a year. Like, what's that about? You just signed the deal. Like, what? Wasn't it January last year? Like, they made it official?
Yep.
Come on. It's a little over a year, but come on. Like, seriously? Why are you doing this? And I feel like all of this stuff, just a domino effect, just going from where it was, is trying to back us into corners, and then trying to beat DoorDash at their own game, signing up restaurants. And I think it would have been okay if they had as many drivers as DoorDash, because DoorDash at the time when they had all these sign-ups, they were just, I guess, yes, they were signing up restaurants that that they didn't ask permission, right? Okay. Yep. But they also had the amount of drivers needed to knock out all these orders, but Grubhub orders were just sitting and these restaurants were getting these bad reviews, and they weren't allowing many drivers on their platform. They were signing up all these restaurants, and they weren't like, we were already hip to it, where we're not going to accept just anything you send to us, Grubhub. So no. Yep. And then they didn't even flood the market. I always wanted Grubhub to just open it up, but did not want them to open it up like Uber, right? I wanted them to open it up, so a lot of these orders they were sending me, they should have drivers over there. Why are you sending it to me? Don't send it to me. Send it to the driver over there, you know? But what's your thoughts on as far as like oversaturation on that platform, Grubhub?
Yeah, there was something that happened, in the way that they used to do things, in that I can remember that, and of course I was never Premier,
Yeah,
so I always had to get on, like at Saturday morning to get my schedules.
yeah,
And usually that was all right. I could get all sorts of, blocks and not a problem if I got on Saturday morning.
yeah,
And all of a sudden it was getting harder and harder to get on,
yeah,
but and it was I think they started letting more drivers on, but they were still real tight with their schedule,
hmm,
trying to keep it from getting overflowed too much. But then, um, in fact, I remember that was the thing. That was the one thing that kind of got me back to Uber Eats because I was out on, we were on a road trip one Saturday and driving across Nebraska where there's no signal, finally got signal and it's
hmm,
like, there's no blocks available. And that was the week they said, okay, I'm going to give Uber Eats a shot. I'm going to do all Uber Eats this week because I couldn't get any Grubhub blocks.
right,
And all of a sudden, Uber Eats had gotten a lot better. They had changed a lot of things too.
yeah,
But and it was just like, oh man, I'm making almost as much money on Uber Eats as I was making on Grubhub. And I ran with that for a little while. And then I get back on Grubhub, and all of a sudden it was like it was getting easier and easier to get the blocks. But then there were longer waits between orders too.
yeah,
So there's something like they opened up the floodgates as far as how many people they were going to get scheduled.
yeah,
And maybe they figured that they were overdoing it on trying to restrict those schedules because then all of a sudden we could start, um, I don't know. It was like all of a sudden it seemed like things were slowing down on the one side, but it was easier to get a schedule block on the other side. And so they changed something about the way they were doing the scheduling.
yeah.
And that I think it made it a little bit harder. And, definitely I never really went back as far as Grubhub being my bread and butter,
Yeah.
just because all of a sudden it was like Grubhub was the one where I couldn't get the orders.
Yeah. Now I do remember when they implemented that policy, that new policy of dropping your block, right?
Mhm.
They said you had to drop it within 72 hours before your block started, or you could be schedule restricted. So I'm like, why would you put a policy like that in place? That's like things happen the day before, like
Mhm.
why would you say you're going to restrict me when I have young kids, right? I'm making it a personal issue, right? I
Sure.
have young kids. Right? So,
But that's a reality for anybody that's doing this
right.
gig economy stuff.
And if I'm dropping a block the day before, at least I'm dropping it versus just keeping it and not showing up for it. I feel like it was so much better when they, when we figured out the system about the schedule, like they would they would put that block back into the queue or make it available for everyone. I think 14 or 15
14 minutes.
right after, if the person didn't show up, too bad, so sad. And I think DoorDash does this, right? If you don't show up 30 minutes for your schedule, they make it available again. So I'm like, why did they have to turn it into, well, if you don't show up, then this is going to happen. If you drop it within 72 hours, not even 24, 72 hours. If you don't drop it before that, we could schedule restrict you. What? Wait, what? For real? Like, why? So all of that stuff, man, I just feel like, Grubhub was on the downhill. They were going downhill. When I saw that, it just turned into everything is our fault. You're taking all your frustrations out on us. All your lawsuits have nothing to do with us. The moment that go ahead.
Oh, when they started playing, that whole schedule restriction game,
Yeah.
and they would restrict people's schedules for it's like you had no idea.
Exactly.
I had it happen one time, and it had to do with, I think, something to do with when I dropped a block or something like that.
Right.
At that time, I could still go into the driver specialist. He could explain it, and he actually changed it.
Exactly.
But it was like there were so many unwritten rules out
Right.
there,
Right.
and all this stuff trying to control the driver, trying to get the driver under control. And
Right.
it's like, dude, if you want that much control, you start hiring employees,
Exactly. But remember when AB5 and Prop 22 and all that was going on, Grubhub was just sitting back and relaxing while DoorDash and Uber was like, hey, no, 200 million. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. All right, please promote Prop 22, and Grubhub didn't have nothing to do with that. Like, I think they really did want employees. So they set their model, their whole business model in a way for if things went this way of them having employees, they already had some kind of structure in place for it. Uber doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, they said Uber has something in place, but they just didn't want employees. And DoorDash is the same. Okay, cool. But
I was wondering if that's what they were kind of rolling their dice on, thinking
maybe
that
it feels that way, don't it?
And they kind of felt like they could be the one company that could handle it, because there was a time where before the pandemic, there were I think a couple of quarters where Grubhub was profitable, and nobody else was even close. And a lot of that had to do with they had their online ordering platform and stuff, and that was their bread and butter. That was the moneymaker for them. And then, delivery was just kind of piggybacked on top of that. So they had other revenue that could keep them at least close to breaking even if that happened. And I think they kind of thought maybe I've always wondered that, as if they thought that they could survive being forced into an employee model and the others couldn't.
Yeah. Maybe that's what they were banking on. That's why they probably wasn't worried, because with everything that was going on, it just seems as if, they just unfazed by everything. Even DoorDash taking their spot. Like, oh, we're not worried about that. I was like, what plan do they have?
Well, they acted like they weren't worried about it, but then we as drivers, I think we saw that they were worried about it. I wrote a thing back in 2019. What was it? It was like the title of it was DoorDash has Grubhub in their sights. And the whole thing was about, and DoorDash is starting to make a move here. And this is back when still, Grubhub had 40-50% of the market, and DoorDash was still kind of a small
just
player.
rising slowly.
And that was the whole gist of it, was the way that they seem to be turning on the drivers seems like it's a reaction.
Yeah.
That instead of making things better on their end, it was like, we're going to force the drivers into compliance. And that was their reaction to the whole thing. So, on the one side, I think, Matt Maloney was like, acting all cool and acting like there's no threat. But you could see in the way that they were changing how they were acting with the drivers that they were
reacting. Going on. Yeah.
They were reacting.
That picture, I don't even know why they posted that picture. That was like a terrible picture in my opinion, when he said that, I'm done. I'm going to resign. I'm going to step down from Grubhub. His eyes were bloodshot red. Did you see that picture?
I didn't see that picture.
You didn't see that? Well, the picture I saw, his eyes were bloodshot red. I'm like, it's either he's tired or he's high. one of the two. I'm like, if he's high, that man's stressed out over here, and if he's tired, that man's stressed out. Like, what's going on, right? But his eyes were bloodshot red, and I'm like, what's going on with you, Matt?
Do you remember though when Uber Eats and Grubhub were in talks, and it was looking there for a while like Uber Eats was going to be the one to take them over?
Yeah, I thought Uber was gonna get that.
Yeah, and I remember reading some things afterwards that they talked about the Uber management responding or reacting to the way that Grubhub's people were acting. And it was almost like there was an arrogance in the way that they were doing the negotiations, that it was like Grubhub came into this saying, hey, we're we are all that, we are
Yeah.
going to be, this is a better deal than you could ever hope for, or something like that. And,
Right.
and that is, I think, probably what cost them that deal more than anything about price.
Mm.
That it was just like, there was a like, oh man, we can't deal with this team here. And there was like a cockiness or something like that about
Yeah.
them.
It definitely was a cockiness, it
Yeah.
definitely was. But I guess, with fast forwarding towards 2022 and seeing how after Just Eat Takeaway bought the company and they allowed Matt to still do his thing in the US, and then slowly but surely you saw them changing the colors, changing the logo, changing this, changing that. I was like, okay, what's happening next? Then Matt steps down. And now, today or yesterday, John McCallion sent me an article saying that Just Eat Takeaway is thinking about putting them up for sale. I'm like, what? What was the purpose of signing? You made this whole big deal. Oh, we're gonna sign them all now. It's gonna be approved in the next couple of weeks. Everything's gonna be great. And then all of a sudden now, a year later, a year and change later, here we are. So I wanna open up the lines, Entre.
Yeah.
I call you Andre. I'll call you Ron. I call you, you call me Brian. You call me UDM. I respond to all names, right? So I want to open up the lines and just hear the perspective of drivers in 2022, because I started in 2018. When did you sign up for Grubhub?
I was 2018 as well.
You're 2018 as well. So
Yeah.
both of us 2018. So
yeah, I started with Uber Eats.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember running across a Grubhub driver and said, I made $1,300 last week. I was like,
yeah,
I gotta check these guys out.
Yeah, exactly. And then I signed up the day before they close signups in my market. So I want to get at least one call in for any newer driver that might not have experienced all the things we experienced from 2018 to now, but to see how they feel whenever they signed up for Grubhub, to where there's a possibility they might sell. They might get put up for sale. Right. So I do have a caller in the queue. I want to take this call. You ready to chop it up with somebody on the line? Okay.
Let's go for it.
All right. Let's see. Who do we have here? Talk to us, caller. Thank you for calling Chop It Up Live.
So Grubhub in my market is actually pretty strong. We were commenting back and forth about it earlier, and it's a big majority of my income. In fact, Grubhub, in my opinion, has been stronger than DoorDash has been today. So, I feel that people mischaracterize it a lot. I do feel they do have a war on drivers as well, though. They have that whole new policy of, if this happens, if that happens, if the other thing happens, that you had a previous Chop It Up about. And it's aimed directly at us who multi-app. They basically kind of do have an employee mindset about it. They want their premier drivers. They want you to be a premier driver and take everything.
Right.
90% is absolutely ridiculous. For DoorDash, it's 70, and even then, you don't have to maintain it. You can just grind at the end of the month if you really wanted top dasher. But I feel that people unfairly characterize it. I really wish they would not just give up on it immediately. And having less choice is bad, people, for both us as drivers and for the consumer. In my market, at least, if DoorDash and Uber Eats are flooded, they go to Grubhub and order on there.
All right. So for all those that don't know, this is Bud Soda on the line. All right. Are you familiar with Bud Soda, Ron?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So Bud Soda's on the line. He's sharing his opinion, but now I'm going to ask you, Bud, do you feel like it's the driver's fault that Grubhub is in the position that they're in now?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay.
I don't. No.
So
you have to develop your business strategy around that. It's their responsibility, not ours.
Right. So what could Grubhub have done better before Just Eat Takeaway bought them out? Okay, so wait, before I even ask that question, that's a question I know Ron could probably answer, but what year did you sign up for Grubhub?
Just this year.
Just this year. Okay, so.
Well, I signed up a long time ago, but I have been put on a long wait list. I just finally got in this year.
So you just got on. You just got on recently. So, Ron, let me ask you this. What could Grubhub have done better before Just Eat Takeaway bought them, before they started considering being put up for sale, right? What could they have done better to be profitable and still be in the rat race, even be number 2 within all 3 major players right now? From a driver's perspective that's been with the platform and seen them transition from where they used to be to where they are now?
The main thing I guess I could think of is just not to have transitioned, just all the changes that we talked about, it's all the changes that we talked about. But, then again, it's like, kind of like the Yum Brands thing, you can't put toothpaste back in the bottle. Once they've gone that route, it's real hard for them to walk that back.
I like that. I've never heard that before. You can't put toothpaste back in the bottle. Yeah, I've never heard that before. So just give me a minute. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead, finish.
Yeah. So I think that, one thing that Grubhub never really did until the pandemic was they never deviated from their pay. When things got really busy, so like, we'd have a snowstorm going on, and all of a sudden Uber Eats is offering these big surges.
Right.
And DoorDash has got their peak pay, and Grubhub just has their regular pay.
Yeah.
And they never did anything, and they never really adjusted to market conditions to try and attract drivers. And again, I think it was kind of this arrogance that they just figured that their drivers were going to stay with them.
Yeah, well,
because we're Grubhub.
It's the same thing. Exactly. Just like the customers. Oh, we're not worried about the customers. And then they find out, the customers are using all the platforms. Oh, they're promiscuous.
They're promiscuous.
They're promiscuous. And they go on live television. They go on television and they put this out to the world. Hey, you were supposed to be using our platform and our platform only, but now I'm labeling you as promiscuous because you're using DoorDash and Uber Eats and Postmates at the time. But come on, seriously?
And I remember thinking back then that Grubhub was still the best at marketing. They were still the best at getting new people in the door.
Yeah.
The problem was they were losing people out the back door faster than anything. But the biggest problem I think that they had was, like, if you followed, I followed everybody on Twitter, and Grubhub was always the one where customers were just complaining left and right on Twitter. Customers were just always trashing on Grubhub. And for some reason, and I don't know how much of it was, maybe there were some issues with some of the drivers. But the big problem was, I think, orders not getting taken.
Yeah.
And Grubhub never adjusted to try and, make some things a little more acceptable on an order.
Yeah.
And like with DoorDash, if an order doesn't get taken for a while, eventually they bump up the price. Or else they kick it out fast enough to enough people that somebody eventually takes it.
Yeah.
There's a top dasher out there that will take it sometime.
Right.
But I think it was just like Grubhub never changed how they do things as far as sending orders out to the customers. And in fact, I think there's a lot of things about Grubhub that are exactly the same today as they were 4 years ago. But it plays out differently. It used to be that the food was always ready on Grubhub, it seemed like, but it was because things were so busy that the orders, that the orders had to wait a certain amount of time before a driver was ready to come, because their drivers were out taking other deliveries. And so by the time he got there, everything worked great.
Right.
On the really slow days, you would notice that you got an order the same time the restaurant did.
Yeah. And that was a
And it
major
was like-
complaint. That was a major complaint from the restaurant. Hey, I just got it.
Yep.
Just showing up was like a threat to them. Like, no, I'm just on time.
I know.
And then, I just got it. You got to give me a minute.
And that has become more and more of a problem.
Yeah.
But the thing that I noticed is it's not so much that it's more of a problem, but it's because they're not as busy as they used to be.
Yeah.
And that's why we notice it more.
Yeah.
But I think they've always dispatched the same way.
Yeah.
And when things got slow, they would end up trying to, I think, and that was the reason that we always started seeing such long distance Grubhub orders, was because I think they were trying to time it. You know, okay, this order is going to be ready in 10 minutes. Let's find a driver who's 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that way the restaurants don't, you know, and that was kind of how they would respond, instead of waiting a little while before they send the order to somebody real close. They're going to send it to somebody who's 10 minutes away, so that that driver spends 10 minutes driving to the restaurant to show up at the same time and everything like that. And, you know, so when they did react, it was always trying to fix things maybe from their perspective and not thinking about the drivers.
Yeah.
And the more they turned on the drivers, the more drivers decided that cherry picking is the way to go. Or the more stubborn we would become, I guess, about things. And so I think part of it was probably the best thing that they could have done was to say, how can we change things ourselves?
Yeah.
Rather than how can we force the drivers to change, or how can we force the restaurants to change, or any of those things.
Now, you know, I have a question, and I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm really enjoying this conversation, but you know, I'm going to have to start wrapping it up in a bit. Right. But this question, I want Bud Soda, I want you, Ron, I want everybody in the chat to answer this as best as they can. All right. So Bud Soda, since you're on the line, I'm going to give you the shot first. Did these platforms create multi-appers and cherry pickers?
Oh yeah. These platforms made it so it's very desirable to want multi-app. There's no one platform, except on very occasions like the weekends where it's payday, where I think that any one platform can keep you busy enough to not want to multi-app. And us drivers had it figured out that we can maximize our profit if we have multiple platforms to pick from. I really think that what he was going on about is like Grubhub refused to change, and that was their downfall. Like, they could have made it so it was different how they deployed it. They could have worked with their restaurants better. I mean, I, on an individual level, have worked with my restaurants that do Grubhub, and they're actually much better than they were when I first started Grubhub.
Okay.
So, like, the fact that they couldn't do that on their end is just a miserable failure, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. What about you, Ron? Did they create cherry pickers and multi-appers?
Well, I think just by the nature of using independent contractors, to a certain extent, they did that way.
Yeah.
You know, and a part of it was also, I think there were enough people that were starting to figure out that it's like, hey, if I'm an independent contractor, I have a choice, right?
Right.
And so it took a while, I think, for that to grow. I think between you and, you know, a number of other people that started figuring out, you know, on YouTube, making it like, you know, hey guys, pay attention. You can start to do this. You can make your choices. And so, and especially as people started figuring out you could multi-app, and not only that you could, but that it was legal to do so. It was all within our contract to do so.
Right.
And so I think that was a lot of it. But then I think too, man, there were a lot of times where I wouldn't even think of opening up another app because Grubhub kept me busy.
Exactly.
Grubhub kept feeding me.
Right. And that's what I'm getting at. That's the reason why I know as independent contractors, we do have the right to work as many platforms as we want to. But just like DoorDash, there were drivers, there were dashers out here that were like, absolutely not. I'm not turning on another app. Nope. I'm loyal. All I need to do is just work DoorDash. I make my money. Then something happened. and they just change one little thing for their benefit, but it hurts us. And now this driver has to make a decision. Well, I used to be loyal to you, and now you're not paying me well enough. So now I have to try to make ends meet because now I left my $100,000 job, $100,000 a year job to do this full time. And I love the freedom, but now you're taking so much more from me, and I can't do this. So that to me was the birth of multi-apping, because I've said it multiple times. I've been talking about multi-apping for years, and then not until after things started to die down with COVID, where people were starting to come out more and people getting vaccinated, like when all that stuff started happening, like and the order volume died down just a little bit, or the money started coming down just a little bit, that's when people were like, okay, well, I got to make a decision. Birth of the multi-apper. I can't take these $2. I've taken too many $2. I've taken too many $3. I can't take any more. I got to make some money here. So that's why I asked the question.
Did you ever feel like, I remember a lot of times like this, where it was like you'd get on a roll and it was just like Grubhub was feeding you. And it was like every order was like, oh, this is good. Keep going.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden you turn one down. And then all of crickets. and then it was like all of a sudden, 7 Taco Bells in a row.
Yes.
And, you start to feel like, man, if you're going to punish me, I'm not going to play your game here. I'm just going to turn on Uber Eats, or I'm going to turn on DoorDash or Postmates back in the day or something like that. And I think that was a lot of the birth, I think, of cherry picking, was just people figuring out that it's like, no, I'm not going to be manipulated into taking these crap orders.
Yeah.
If you're not going to give me something good, somebody else is.
Yep, exactly. So at this time, even though I'm enjoying this conversation, it's really good, I do have a 4:30 catering order that I got to go get, right? And it's 15 minutes away, right? But I got to make sure I get there. I got to get all my bags because it's a decent size. So as much as I want to continue this conversation, I feel like we should have a part 2, because first, Ron, you've been around for a while. You said you signed up in 2018, but this is the first time I've had you on the channel. I don't know why, right? It's actually not the first time. I think it's the second time, isn't it? Is it the second time?
Yeah.
It was a while.
About a year ago or something like that.
It was a while ago. But I'm like, hey, this conversation is too good. I would like to continue it. I want to have a part 2. So I guess right now, Bud Soda, go ahead and say what you got to say to the family so we can wrap up, and I'm gonna close out with Entre Courier. Okay.
All right, great conversation, guys. Thank you for this. I'm looking forward to part 2. DFAM, keep your minds open. Even if you think Grubhub's bad, keep your minds open to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, you have a good one, okay, brother, and stay safe on the road.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
I think that's the thing. What he said, though, is keep your mind open, I think, is a good way to look at it. In that, I've looked at some other platforms, and most of them are like, okay, they're not all they're advertised to be.
Yeah.
But there's always a diamond out there. There's always something out there.
Yeah.
And so maybe Grubhub, even if they're not going to be your bread and butter, there's always that good delivery that shows up on Grubhub when it's not showing up on anybody else.
Exactly. Keep your options open, And so, Ron, at this time, if you have anything that as far as like location, where can they find you if they do not know? If you want to share your website, I could pin that to the top of the comment section so they could check out your content. You have a podcast. You go ahead. Share your social platforms.
You can look for Deliver on Your Business is the name of the podcast. If you go to Entre Courier, EntreCourier.com. I'm probably the most active on Twitter of any of them, and it's just under Entre Courier there. So you can find me at any of those.
Yeah.
And
all right. Well, Ron, Entre Courier, brother, I appreciate you for having this conversation with me. And I want you to come back so we could continue the conversation, because there's not many drivers that I feel that I can have this one-to-one with, that we understand where we came from, like the 2018 Grubhub. There's some drivers that signed up in like 2019 after the new pay model, right? And they didn't really understand how things were a year ago, a year prior.
Yeah, there's a lot of drivers out there now that never realized that you used to get $3 offers all the time on Grubhub.
Yeah.
And when the pandemic started, they started doing that minimum pay and everything like that. And they never realized that it didn't used to be that way.
Yeah.
So there's a whole different generation of drivers, if you can call it that.
Yeah, it definitely is. So Ron, it's been a pleasure, brother. Just hold on one second. I'm gonna do an outro, and I guess we'll finish our conversation after the stream. Okay. All right. So if you want to say bye to the family,
guys, thanks everybody for being on and everything. It's been fun talking about this stuff.
All right, brother. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. All right. So family, that was Entre Courier. And we have this Grubhub conversation. We will have a part 2, because I feel like I cut it short, and it's because I accepted the 4:30 catering order. But it's good money. Why wouldn't I accept it if it's good money, right? But anyway, so I appreciate y'all for tuning in. I know this was almost like an impromptu stream. You wasn't really expecting it. And if you enjoyed, just do us a favor and squeeze the life out the blasted like button, and we will see you in the next episode. All right? Deuces.